Let's look at Gerard Manley Hopkins's Easter Communion. I'll read it and then we'll mark it up and have a look at what's going on. Pure fasted faces draw unto this feast. God comes, all sweetness to your Lenten lips. You striped in secret with breathtaking whips. Those crooked, rough-scored checkers may be pieced to crosses meant for Jesus. You whom the East with draught of thin and pursuant cold so nips, breathe Easter now. You surged fellowships, you vigil keepers with low flames decreased. God shall o'erbrim the measures you have spent with oil of gladness for sackcloth and frieze, and the ever fretting shirt of punishment give Mary threaded golden folds of ease. Your scarce sheathed bones are weary of being bent. Lo, God shall strengthen all the feeble knees. This, an interesting thing here in terms of Hopkins' poetry is that though this has many very typically Hopkinsian things, and we'll talk about that, it may surprise people familiar with some of his most famous poems, not all of them, by the fact that it's a sonnet. It's got it's an octet and a sextet. You've got 8 lines, and then you've got 6 lines there, and so in that sense, it's a fairly traditional verse form. He does interesting things with it, and the thing with Hopkins is that I think, though Hopkins is by no means a revolutionary, he's a counter-revolutionary, if anything. That may, you see this search for a pure diction, a new diction, new in the sense of not invented, but in the sense of an ability to speak English poetry post-romantically, though he is very influenced by Romanticism. And I think you wonder whether you look at a guy who's most famous biographically for becoming a Roman Catholic and a Roman Catholic priest, as this becomes more acceptable in Britain in the wake of the Oxford movement and John Henry Newman and things like that. So, you've got a kind of interesting biography here, and you come to this as a religious poem. His poems are generally religious. His pre-religious poetry does not basically survive. He destroyed it. But this is a religious poem. Explicitly, this is about the end of the Lenten period of further restrictions, further self-disciplines, further fasts, and here communion is depicted as a feast, the communion of Easter, the Easter Vigil, I guess, and that's that gives us a very strong location and sense of its importance to him. That this is a major part of the religious year. This is a moment of very sincere and intense piety, and what we come to here then is we looked at John Donne's "Hymn to God, my God, in my sickness," and there's an interesting thing there that the metaphysical poets were sometimes seen as over showy, over playful. And it's funny because George Herbert certainly is not, but say John Donne or Thomas Traherne, even where there are formal, maybe what we would see as kind of, we suspect are pretensions, even if they are in fact not pretensions, where those happen, say in Donne, it doesn't mean there's not sincerity. In fact, it's part of what should challenge our idea of what a pretension is. And it's similar with Hopkins, is that he is doing some things that are formally interesting, while this nonetheless is he's using that for that formal experimentation or formal pressing to communicate these strong feelings. We'll just note a couple other things. You have in that line interesting things. It's a sonnet, so that's easy. It's an octet and a sextet, that's easy. But you do have an interesting thing where the rhyme scheme starts kind of that's B, sorry, kind of normal. A B B A A B B A. So though it's not as simple or as easy as A B A B, where you get the rhyme paid off fairly quickly. You do have this a very this again, you get a change of the rhyme scheme here. And that's natural. But there's just a tiny bit of play on the rhymes there. This very slightly more complex than just A B A B A B A B C D C D C D. You get that in the second verse, but not in the first verse. What's more interesting, though, are two things. One is the sheer amount of internal rhyme, alliteration, and so on you have. So, fasted faces, feast, feast, internal assonance to sweetness, Lenten lips, striped in secret, crooked checkers, which maybe goes down to crosses as well. And you could. I think there's another example too. Scarce sheathed is an obvious one. You have a plenty of those, and you have a pretty distinctive set of choices of words. So though this is less formally experimental than the Windover or Binsey Poplars indeed, which I've also had a look at on the channel. You can see what you do have is some of this musicality that becomes dominant for him, a certain kind of internal musicality, but also interesting phrases. Thin and pursuant cold, so nips. Thin and pursuant cold. That's a very striking phrase. You surged fellowships here. Without being certain, we're talking about material surge, presumably. We're talking about people robed in particular ways, and who and they're vigil keepers. The sense of and this is not for special people. This is for ordinary Roman Catholics, presumably. But the sense of taking part in some special religious great act that happens every year. They are in the Surged Fellowship, and they are vigil keepers. So you have some striking images. You have a lot of biblical images, which are not necessarily particularly rare, but God shall brim the measures you have spent with oil of gladness, for sackcloth and frieze and the ever-fretting shirt of punishment. He will give, there's a square bracket in if you like, he will give murrey-threaded golden folds of ease, and he shall strengthen your feeble knees that were scarce sheathed because you're so thin from fasting. Very strong contrast then imagistically between the spending out of the measures, the sackcloth and the frieze and the ever fretting shirt of punishment. Think hair shirt, think Henry II. Scarce sheathed bones that are weary of being bent, bent in prayer but also bent under sorrow. They're all going to be replaced. So here, that Hopkinsian freshness of language and of image is there. The rough scored checkers, breathtaking whips. Some of these, even where they're not rare words, breathtaking whips. As a phrase, I think you have this very either unusual words or combinations of words. These crooked, rough-scored checkers may be pieced to crosses meant for Jesu. I guess there were you can have a piece of wood that has been scored to crosses. You're cold. The thin and consumed cold has nipped you. But again, the idea of the cold being personified in that way is quite distinct. You striped in secret with breathtaking whips. You're not boasting about your religious deeds. You shouldn't. Jesus has said not to, but you do this anyway. Was he literally expecting people were flagellating themselves? I don't think we need to go that far. In the same way that people are not necessarily literally having scarce sheathed bones, but there is this sense of this intense period of fasting that leads, and and it's interesting that he uses all these kind of distinctive phrases, fresh phrases, very strong images to point towards a feast. pure fasted faces draw onto this feast, which is a very strong first line due to how pure and musical that alliteration is. This is particularly pointing towards the idea that communion is that the Roman Catholic Mass particularly is the feast, and that you've had a great fast to prepare for this. And it's not that you've had a great fast to show your righteousness necessarily, or to earn God's approval, though it may well earn God's approval. And certainly you're not doing it for other people as secret flagellation, but that it's all building towards this great moment of the Mass and the centrality of the Mass. And you can see this is one of those things that points beyond the poetry to what Hopkins cared about. You see this with many poems, of course. So yeah, we have here. I don't think this is absolutely top tier Hopkins, but I think it is an and I think you see less of the really special experimentations that help purify the dialect of the tribe, in Eliot's phrase. But I think what you do see is you just begin to see this. If this was your first Hopkins poem, just this ability to come up with distinctive combinations. And here he's using a traditional verse form, but just subtly twisting your expectations of it. Just doing things which he's putting ornamentation into parts of the sonnet which you don't automatically, think for particularly. Let's just hop back to Hymn to God My God. The Holy Sonnets would be a better comparison for Donne, but Donne, though he certainly has many of these metaphysical points, and there's a parallel between metaphysicals and Hopkins. Here, the things that are formally unusual, otherwise it's fairly simple. I put that ABB, is word choice. Talking about the idea the physicians are cosmographers and I am their map. Putting in Latin tags, talking about modern day exploration, things like that. Like, I think, it is it's less formally experimental. Whereas here, those strong internal assonances and rhymes are pointing beyond the sonnet as the ideal form for what Hopkins wants to do. But anyway, I think it's interesting. I think there is a austere but moving piety to it. I wonder what you think. Please tell me in the comments, and I'll see you next time.